Welcome to the latest episode of the B Movie Club. I'm your host, Kevin. This week we're going to be discussing the 1986 comedy action classic, Running Scared, starring Billy Crystal, Gregory Hines, and Jimmy Smits. For those of you joining us for the first time, the B Movie Club is kind of like a book club, where each week I will post online what movie we'll be discussing, and you can send me your favorite quotes, favorite comments, scenes that you liked, anything you want to say, anything you want to get off your chest, personal feelings, your diary, whatever, and I'll discuss it on the show. You can subscribe to the B Movie Club at YouTube. Look for the B Movie Club. Also look for KD9575 on Twitter. And don't forget to like the thumbs up on the official B Movie Club page on Facebook. Don't forget, tell a friend as well. The more the merrier. Anyway, this week, Running Scared. Billy Crystal and Gregory Hines are the toughest cops in Chicago. Stay with me. Sounds ridiculous, I know, but that's just how it is. In the course of this movie, they realize that a big-time drug dealer has recently gotten out of prison, played by Jimmy Smits, and he's set to become the next Spanish Godfather of Chicago, so he's ready to take over the town. Billy Crystal and Gregory Hines are totally reckless and crazy and out of control. Have you heard this one before? They're cops that don't play by the rules. They don't call for backup. You know, only the wimps wear bulletproof vests, those kind of things. Anyway, they step on the wrong toes, and they're essentially sent out of town. They're said, you know what, you have to take, like, basically forced vacation, get out of the state. So they go to Key West, Florida, spend, I don't know, a couple weeks there, soaking up the sun, and they realize, you know what, forget this whole being a police officer thing. Instead, we're going to retire at the age of 36. Sounds awfully good to me, now that you mention it. And move down to Florida and open up a bar. And that's what they decide to do. So they come back, and they're all laid back now. They're not nearly as wild and crazy as they used to be. They're wearing Hawaiian shirts and things like that. And they submit their official 30-day notice, but they find out that gangster, Julio Gonzalez, is back on the street. They thought he put him away. They thought that they'd handle their business. No, he's out, and he's causing a ruckus. They decide, we're going to put him away before we retire. That'll be our last big thing. But now, they've already started to look forward to those good times. In the 30 days when they'll be retired, sipping Mai Tais down in Key West. So now they are running scared. See, they were reckless before, but now they're kind of, now they're calling for backup. Now they're wearing their bulletproof vests. They're being a little bit more calm and rational. Earlier, they were just ridiculously irrational and insane. They, again, didn't play by the rules. They weren't concerned about the criminal's rights. Did they give them the right to remain silent? I don't know. Who knows? Anyway, so over the course of the movie, Billy Crystal's ex-wife gets kidnapped. They have to steal the coke to give back to the drug dealer because otherwise he'll kill his ex-wife, and there's a shootout, and meanwhile, they have to train their replacements, these two young, equally wild and crazy guys. One of them is played by Stephen Bauer, who you might remember from Scarface. He was Manny. The other one is Jonathan Grise, who you might remember from much later. He was in Napoleon Dynamite as Uncle Rico. So it's an all-star cast, needless to say. So one thing leads to another. I don't want to spoil the entire movie, but everything seems to work out. Spoiler alert. Running Scared. Some things I can tell you about it. Originally, the script called upon two older police officers who were going to retire. And when they hired Peter Hyams to direct it, who had just done 2010, The Space Odyssey, that big hit, he said, you know what, why don't we change it to two young cops who don't retire? So essentially, throw that old script away and we'll start all over. They said, okay. Originally, the older Cadre cops were going to be Paul Newman and Gene Hackman. Totally different movie. And then when they decided to go with the younger cops, it was going to be Tom Selleck and John Travolta. Also, would have been a different movie. Tom Selleck passed on it because of Magnum P.I. John Travolta's agent said, let's take a pass on this. Even though it's been a good 8 years since Saturday Night Fever and you haven't had a hit since then, we're going to take a pass and wait for Look Who's Talking in about 7 years. So good times there. Good thinking. So at that point, they kind of opened up the the Rolodex and said who could we get. Gregory Hines obviously was a famous singer and dancer. He'd been in History of the World Part 1, the Mel Brooks movie, and a few years earlier he was in that hit horror movie Wolfen. Yep. So they brought him in, cast him as Ray Hughes, and Billy Crystal, who had just been on Saturday Night Live for the last year, reinvigorated the whole show with his characters. Fernando, you look marvelous. And prior to that, he'd gotten a lot of acclaim for being on that comedy soap, that sitcom. So they brought him in, and what was funny is Billy Crystal was kind of torn. He's like, do I do this movie? This would kind of be my first big starring role. Or, the other thing he could have done, the producers of Saturday Night Live were like, you know what? We are willing to make it basically the Billy Crystal show. You'll be the main host of the show each week. We'll totally change the format and make it around you. And he was kind of like, what should I do? When at the 11th hour, they fired the producers of Saturday Night Live and brought back the original producer, Lorne Michaels, who wasn't interested in bringing Billy Crystal back. So that made it really easy. He just jumped into Running Scared. There you go. Jimmy Smits plays Julio Gonzalez, the main villain, which is kind of funny because up to this point he hadn't really done a whole lot that was noteworthy, but he took this show and was able to act as a springboard to go on and do L.A. Law, which we all remember. So there you go. I love this movie. This movie is great. I have to tell you, it came out in 1986, so it preceded another buddy cop movie called Lethal Weapon, which people often cite as the first interracial buddy cop movie. However, a year before, Running Scared. So there you go. Now, obviously, there are other differences in this. Like I said before, you had 5'6" Gregory Hines and 5'4" Billy Crystal kicking ass. A little bit of a willing suspension of disbelief. Maybe you could see Mel Gibson acting irrationally, and in fact, he does that a lot nowadays with the cameras not rolling. So there you go. But Billy Crystal, he was mainly a comedian, and Gregory Hines was obviously like a dancer. But needless to say, they were great. They had instant chemistry, I felt. A lot of fun. I had action, a lot of things going on. But as I've said before, Jimmy Smits, who's like a normally sized individual, looks like he could play for the Lakers compared to these other two guys. He looks about 7.5 feet tall. So there you go. There was actually talks of a sequel to Running Scared. It was going to be called Still Running. And there were actually several different scripts that came up, but both Gregory Hines and Billy Crystal looked at the scripts and didn't see anything that they liked. Obviously, Billy Crystal's tune has changed a little bit over the last several years. Now he's like, script, no script, whatever. Where do I sign? Gregory Hines sadly passed about 10 years ago, so there will not be a Running Scared sequel, sadly. So, again, if you have not seen it, I highly recommend it. It is a hoot. It often gets forgotten with a lot of the other buddy cop movies of that time, like I said, Lethal Weapon. But it's fun. There's a lot of musical montages in this. There's the big scene where they go to Key West, and it's a montage of them basically meeting like women left and right, drinking Mai Tais and romancing the ladies on the beach, all to the lovely tune of Michael McDonald's Sweet Freedom. My sweet freedom, shine a light on me. You know that one. Anyway, you can't beat that. There's also another musical montage later where they've stolen Julio Gonzalez's Mercedes and they're driving through town, blast the music, and so it was very 80s. Again, I enjoyed it immensely. I know Roger Ebert saw it, and he gave it, I don't know if he gave it any thumbs, but at the same time he said it was actually kind of a breath of fresh air, kind of had kind of a tongue-in-cheek kind of attitude to it with a little bit of action, so it was good. Rotten Tomatoes, on the other hand, had a slightly different opinion of it, I'm sad to say. They gave it 68%. I don't know what that is. I guess it's a passing grade. So, don't listen to them in this case. If you have not seen it, it is streaming instantly. Check it out. Next week, I'm going to be doing the horror film, the horror classic, Creepshow, based upon the work of Stephen King. He actually wrote the script, directed by the Lord of all Zombies, George Romero. So you have that going for you, which is nice. One thing else I should tell you, there was another Running Scared from 2006 starring Paul Walker. Do not watch this version of Running Scared, not related in any way. What you should do is run scared from the theater that's playing that movie. Instead, again, the 1986 Running Scared with Billy Crystal. As you know, I end every episode with a totally out of context quote, and here it is. Let's bust them. In this neighborhood, a Mercedes is probable cause. Thank you for joining us. Next week, Creepshow. Be well.